This is Upside Down in the Middle of Nowhere, Chapter 36. It takes place Wednesday, August 31st, 2005, at 2:04 in the morning a.m. You're being rude again, Armani, Seely said. If you asked me, my sister took the prize for rude right then. How am I being rude? I'm just standing here, and that's exactly what I was doing, just standing there. Good old Mr. High Pockets managed to scoot us right by the long intake line and took us right to a corner clear on the other side of the huge people packed room, stopping in front of what looked like only two empty cots in the entire place. Someone must have hit a switch because the overhead lights went from blinding bright yellow, white to flickering gray, and a loud buzz filled the room. The kind of buzz them light bulbs make at school right before it's time for Daddy or one of the other maintenance men to come change them. As far as I could tell, the shelter was at least 10 times bigger than our school gym, and it smelled 10 times worse. Thinking about our gym made me think of our table. The scuffed up table made me think of Mama and her supper time and Meemaw with nut dust in the attic. Hello, little voice belonged to my very old Chinese lady, not much bigger than me. Hello, I mumbled. I didn't really want Celie thinking I was rude. You're a very pretty girl, the lady said, smiling so big her eyes all but disappeared, and she nodded, admiring my sisters. My name is Mama, son. She offered me her hand. I shook her small, soft hand, and the lady called Mama Son smiled and nodded some more. You kids need anything, we're right here. And she pointed to where the two Mamas, one black, one white, sat on a cot side by side, just waving at us. I gave a little wave back, and Celie tipped up on her toes and waved, all excited. You kids in the right place. You bring good energy. And she nodded at a man who brought us to the corner. And then she patted Kayla on the head. You be okay, she said to my sister. We stared after her while she made her way back to the other two smiling mamas that I didn't know what to do and she had been so dang sappy happy about. The man laid Kayla down slow and careful on one of the cots and had one itty bitty paper looking pillow and a thin brown blanket, and I couldn't see why anyone would want a blanket with it being so stifling hot and sticky. Kayla rolled in a ball and didn't move an inch when Celia lay down and curled up with our sleeping baby sister. Armani, she said in a sleepy voice, you said that you'd leave me. Would you really do that? And her eyes were barely open, and she blinked slow and heavy. I stood there feeling stupid for even saying the hurtful words to her. No, I'd never leave you, Celia. I stopped staring at the floor and looked at my sister, and she wasn't bigger than Kayla. Just go to sleep. I'm sorry for making you mad, she said with her eyes closed, and a heavy wanting came over me, and a wanting for everyone and everything that used to be, and Mr. High Pockets was tapping on the back of his head, and I glanced over at Celia, and she was already sound asleep. I looked back at the man, and there he was, just tapping with one hand on the back of his head, and he looked at me for a second with his twinkly eyes, and he smiled, looking up at the ceiling, and then he turned his freckled face back at me with a startled look. Sorry about that, my phone rang. He smiled, looking up at the ceiling, and turned his freckled face back at me with a startled look, and the whole while he was tapping away on the back of his gray head. My mouth hung as wide open as my bugged-out eyes. I ain't lying when I said all of a sudden that man with his pants the color of old and pockets all but buried in his armpits pulled a shiny quarter right out of his nose, and he looked at the way that he looked at it this way and that, and he was admiring some long lost treasure. Then he flipped it way up in the air and caught it and stuck it down one of his two high pockets. And he looked at me just then, and I seen the warmth of Daddy in his old man eyes. And he walked over, keeping his eyes on me, and picked up the scratchy-looking blanket from the empty cot, and he held it up against himself and nodded, and I nodded back at him, and he smiled real big, tilted his head to the side, and silently thanked me with the grin of his soft copper-colored eyes. I watched him walk over to the concrete wall, and he shook out his blanket, letting it float down to the hard floor, and he stretched both arms up over his head like he was reaching for the ceiling. He yawned and gave me a little wave. Then that tall, skinny old white man laid himself flat down on his blanket bed. I'd seen the empty cot beside me, and it was fixing to holler at him to get off that dirty floor, but then he folded his hands up under his head and let out a sigh and smiled, closed his eyes. The cot was so uncomfortable, I laid there on my own cot all by myself, wondering if maybe someday I could get one of them things from my bedroom. If I had a bedroom, of course, and if I had a house, I could just be mine again. I couldn't stand for another second. I scooped Kayla up into my arms and brought her to bed with me, and I pulled her in close and forced my eyes shut. I sat straight up on my cot, and the room was filled with buzzing and spooky gray, but not quiet, and trampling feet and songs and screams echoed through the air. My ears felt like they were stuffed with Mississippi mud, making the sounds muffled and loud at the same time. I stuck a finger into each of my ears and gave them a wiggle, and it didn't do no good, and I sat there wide awake with clogged up ears and gray lights flickering down on me. I got up as quiet as I could from the cot, and the paper pillow crinkled, and Kayla flopped her tummy to her back, and I tippy-toed in the dumb boots till I was standing right over there sleeping Celie. "Hey, Celie, you awake?" I whispered. Nothing. She didn't even move. I unzipped her book sack enough to let my hand slip inside, and I found the pink pad of Hello Kitty paper and went back in for something to write with. I was feeling around when my hand stumbled up on something that made me stop, and I didn't have to see them to know what they were. They were Georgie's glasses. "What are these doing in here?" I said out loud to nobody, and I touched the little part that holds the glasses up on a person's nose. Georgie's nose. "He won't be able to see. Mama always says that a boy can't see his own hand in front of his face without his glasses on." Real slow and real careful, I put the glasses back where I'd found them. Right in the plain sight was a pen, and I grabbed it and headed over to the man lying up on the wall. I bent down and nudged him with one finger, and he didn't move. "Hey, mister." And one eye popped open. I about fell out of my boots. "Sorry for waking you up." And he sat up and yawned big, stretching his long arms about a mile, and smiled and tapped his floor next to him, and I sat down, and he made it easy to ask. "You can't talk, can you?" And he shook his head slow from side to side, never breaking the look between us. He has wrinkles running every which way across his face, deep enough to hold that quarter that fell from his nose, and I wanted to reach out and touch one of the creases, but I didn't. "Can you write your name so we all know what to call you?" And I offered him the paper and pen, and he scrunched his shoulders up and held them there. "You can't write?" I didn't ask. I just came right out and said it. I wasn't surprised. I ain't trying to be hurtful, but he had the look about him, someone who can't read. The man shook his head one more time and smiled. "Do you mind if I give you a name?" And his whole face lit up. "Well, I think your name should be Mr. High Pockets." And he took his chin between his pointer finger and thumb, and he scrunched his eyes and lips like he was thinking real hard. I was fixing to tell him never mind, but I knew it was a dumb name, when he popped in his seat and burst into an even bigger smile, and he was on his feet so fast I forgot he was old. He pointed at his own high pants pockets and slapped his knee, and the man was belly laughing with no sound coming out, and I couldn't help it. I laughed too. I swear I seen Celie stealing a look our way, but when I turned to head and look at her, my eyes snapped shut and her eyelids fluttered like butterfly wings, and I could tell she wasn't for real sleeping. Mr. High Pockets had me on my feet with my arms around me quicker than lizards lick, and he gave me a good squeeze, and I squeezed back. I stood over Celie for a long minute, and her eyelids fluttering the whole time, and it must have been hard for her to keep from opening her eyes and letting me know she was really awake, and I slipped her stuff back into her book sack. I leaned over and kissed her on the back of her head and wondered if she understood how far we drifted from home. I cozied back up beside Kayla, and I wrapped one arm around my baby sister and one arm around me. It's chapter 37. It was strange the way the quiet came with the morning. It used to be that dark of night turned everything to a whisper, but not no more. It was morning and mostly quiet, except for the sound of the big push broom lazily sweeping back and forth across the cold floor and the drowsy motor sounds of Kayla's lips. The girl had been lying belly down on the cot, pushing an empty water bottle from one side to the other before they turned the daytime lights on, and had already done taking her to the toilet twice, and every time we passed by the mamas, all three of them would holler good morning like they hadn't already said it 20,000 times. Celie was busy writing in her journal, and I slid on up beside her and kept myself busy fooling with her braids and trying to get them cute again. And Mr. High Pockets had woke up and stretched his long arms higher than the heads of people shuffling about. And when he stood up, he seen me looking and gave a nod my way, and I was fixing to holler hey when a highfalutin voice came out of nowhere. "Well, hello, dears. Ain't y'all just the purtiest things? If I wasn't the squeaky clean shiny lady herself with that old big trifling grin on her face staring down at me and my family, the temperature in my face went up by at least 100 degrees. "Hello," I mumbled, trying to get my best not to actually look at the woman, hoping the whole while that she couldn't see the fear oozing from my skin. "Is your mama here, precious?" The woman's body smelled like a flower garden, and her breath smelled like juicy fruit. Celie tried to turn her head, and I swear I felt her mouth fixing to speak just by the way her hair on her head moved. And I gave one of her braids a quick tug like a person riding a horse does to get the animal to stop. "Ouch," Celie said, and rubbed her head. "No, ma'am, Mama ain't here right now." My good manners were surprising even to me, especially considering the way my insides were twisted in a knot like I'd gone and caught Kayla's bellyache. "What about your daddy?" And my heart thumped in an unnatural way on both sides of my head. Miss Highfalutin didn't stop telling me to get up, trying to get all up in my business. I was going to shove one of Mima's boots down her juicy fruit throat. She needed to go on and bother someone else. "No, ma'am, Daddy ain't here either," I said, just as nice as pie, and my eyes scanned every which way, searching for our searching for our stand-in daddy, Mr. High Pockets, and Celie went back in writing in her journal. Oh my, you're keeping a journal? The woman said, looking down at Celia like she was going to eat her up. I always keep mine close by because I never know when I'm going to need it. Celia whipped around, but all but tearing my fingers loose from her hair, and I seen the tiniest twinkle come back in her eyes. Me too, my teacher says. The only way that people could stay sharp is if they read and write every day. Well, it sure sounds like you got a fine teacher. And she winked at Celie, and Celie beamed. It's so nice to see you writing away with your pretty little feather pen. I got a flamingo pink one at home just like it. Celie giggled, but it didn't do one thing to settle my nerves. And Kayla scooted up close to me, and she stared at the loud lady and rubbed her eyes with her fat little fists. The lady tilted her head and smiled back at my baby sister, all sweet like, and she, the same way she looked at that little kid she hauled off to Child Protective Services the night before. I was seeing straight through her pretending to be nice act, and I stood up. Well, I said, my eyes letting my eyes drill holes in the meddling woman. We best be getting back to what we was doing. Thanks for stopping by to say hey. And I took a clumsy step closer to the confused, sweet-smelling woman. You all say bye to the nice lady. She's leaving now. And I gave her one of my famous "you best be leaving now" looks and took a good head in a good head slide. Instead of staying by, Kayla stood up and took Miss Highfalutin's hand in hers and looked up at the woman's with her belly and her lip poked out bigger than ever. And she said in a cute little voice, "I want to see Mama now." Me and Celie shot a look at each other, and I hurried up and wrapped my arms around Kayla's shoulder, planting a quick smile on my face, and my lips stuck to my dry teeth, and whatever I was fixing to say flew right out of my head. That woman looked straight into me, and I wanted to pull my eyes away, but they were fixed on her, just staring, and I couldn't blink. I could feel her looking around inside my head. I tried to swallow, but there wasn't nothing in my mouth to swallow, and the outside corners of the woman's eyes dropped, and I seen a tear growing in one of them, and there was a look of lonesome sitting in her pretty green brown eyes that forced me to blink, and she smiled a small, soft smile that made my arms ache for one of Mama's morning hugs, and my own eyes got blurry. She nodded at me, then kneeled down next to Kayla, and she folded her free hand over the top of one of the one she had holding Kayla's. As soon as she let loose of my eyes, I pulled the sleeve of my shirt up to wipe across my face. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked my sister, Kayla. Kayla, she said the name and put her hand on the side of my sister's chubby face. She leaned into the woman's hand. "I'm not here to take you to your mama, sweetie. I'm here to see if there's anything I can do to help y'all." And she glanced up at me. "Are y'all thirsty? What if I get you something yummy to drink?" And her juicy breath floated up and got in my nose, and I noticed her name tag for the first time. Priscilla Nash, and I was surprised it didn't say Miss Highfalutin. Kayla stuck one pudgy finger in her mouth and said, "I want Mama," and her bottom lip went to quivering, and I could see the ugly cry building up in her face. "Actually," Celie said, "she hasn't been feeling well. She has a tummy ache and diet." "Oh, she's just fine." Got a little gas. "That ain't right, ain't that right, Kayla?" And I faked a loud laugh. It was too loud. Not Priscilla Nash and nobody else needed to know our business, and sweat ran into my eyes. When I threw a look at Celia to let her know her mouth was the size of the entire Gulf of Mexico, Kayla wandered away from us, and I tried to point with my head and shift the eyes. But Celia was too dim-witted to figure out what I was trying to tell her, and she just kept staring at me like she was born yesterday. "Celia," I said with my teeth all clenched together, but just then Kayla got swallowed up by the crowd of people shuffling from every corner of the stupid shelter just to get up in the growing food lines, and a stab of panic shot through me like I was tied to a rocket. "Kayla!" I screamed, but the second fear hit the air, I seen my baby sister rise up over the top of everybody's head, smiling all big with her hands wrapped around the top of good old Mr. High Pocket's silvery head. He had her head up on his shoulders, and by the looks of it, he was enjoying the ride as much as Kayla. Mr. High Pocket's smile went from stretch across his freckly face to a smile that wasn't so sure when he got a good look at me, and he brought Kayla down off his shoulders and held her in one arm up against his side, situating her lime green headband back into place on her frizzy head. There was an honest to goodness ache in my face trying to keep the stupid smile on there, but I had to, and I kind of missed up in your business, Priscilla Nash watching everything. "My, oh my," the woman said with both of her hands folded up across her chest like it was her sister who got lost. "Thank goodness your daddy was right there." She turned and looked at me. "This man is your daddy, right?" And I couldn't look at her for more than a second, so I found a spot on the top of Kayla's head to stare at instead. "Yep," is all I said, and I took Kayla from the man and set her down beside me, and careful to keep a hand on her shoulder. Miss Priscilla Nash walked over to Mr. High Pockets. My brain was screaming, "Why can't this woman just leave us alone?" "Hello," she said. "My name is Priscilla Nash," and she held out her hand, and Mr. High Pocket shook it. I've been chatting with your delightful children. Lord have mercy. If Mima didn't say the words in my ear right then, I don't know who did. Miss Priscilla Nash looked at each one of us, sprinkling her sweetness on us with her eyes, and it was making me half sick. I have to use it, Amani. Kayla hopped up from one foot to the next. Okay, well, I hate to be rude, I said, but she really needs to go to the bathroom. Miss Priscilla Nash looked slanty-eyed from me to Mr. High Pockets, who stood there with their lopsided grin on his face. The lady was most likely wondering why our white daddy wasn't saying a single word. Get your book sack, Celia said, avoiding the eyes of Miss Priscilla Nash. My book sack's on my back, silly. And I stopped the fiddling and was gonna. It was doing it. I was doing a shot another look at Celie, and it was obvious by the sound of her voice that she didn't have a clue that we were in big trouble if we didn't hurry up and get away from that nosy woman in the red vest. My eyes poured down on me, and I took a deep breath and tried to count to 10 the way I'd seen Mama do 1,000 times, fake smiling and trying my best not trying my best to sound not annoyed. I said, "Okay, well, let's take Kayla to the bathroom." And I rolled my eyes, and my head went to sliding from one shoulder to the next, and my head just did it, despite my good intentions. Miss Priscilla Nash and Mr. High Pockets were looking at me like I was crazy, and I didn't care. Right then, I felt crazy. I grabbed Kayla by the hand, and she wasn't using it to hold herself, and I walked right over and slipped my other hand into Mr. High Pocket's leathery hand, and I clomped off, heading to the stupid mile-long line for the bathroom. I never looked back at the lady, and I left standing there, and Celie scuttled up behind me and hollered, "It was very nice meeting you, Miss Priscilla Nash." "Likewise," the woman hollered back. "Whatever," I said under my breath, walking as fast and meaningful as I could in the ugly boots. "What?" Celie asked me when she came alongside me. "Well, we'll see how nice it was to meet her when she hauls your baby-fed butt into juvenile court over some foster home." How could I explain to Celia that I knew Miss Priscilla Nash was a nice lady? I'd seen it in her eyes, but nice people trying to do the right thing can be the most dangerous kinds of people. Mima said it to me all the time. Messy do-gooders like that can't be trusted. Celie stopped walking, and I took a bunch more steps and turned back to see her just standing there. "Come on, girl. Kayla needs to go use it." She did too. She was doing the potty dance, hopping up from one foot to the other. "Why are you so mean, Armani? She's a nice lady. She could help us." A family carrying a stack of styrofoam food containers walked right behind me and Celie, making it so I lost sight of her. And I didn't like the feeling that swept through me for a second. And the hungry family finally moved out of the way, and there she was, looking more pitiful than ever. "I ain't mean, Celia Jean Curtis. I'm trying to look out for you, but you're too young and dumb to understand that." And I turned and headed for the bathroom. Mr. High Pocket's head looked heavy on his shoulders, and it was shaking, and it was huge frown scrunched up on his face. "I wish you weren't my sister." And Celie's words boomed through the air for the whole world to hear, and slammed into my chest. And I didn't hear nothing else except those hateful 6 words. No other people, no lights buzzing, no footsteps, no babies wailing, no noise at all, just Celie's words. "I wish you weren't my sister." That's the end of 37.